Welcome back to Gospel Chats with Ryan and Marshall. We're excited that you joined us again, and I'm excited to chat with you today.
Me too.
So, before I throw it over to you,
oh dear,
you and I have had the chance for the last couple of weeks to go on a seminary tour. Right, we've been in and out
world
of
tour is
a
amazing.
world tour, multiple high school seminaries throughout St. George, visiting with the seminary students, teaching them about Institute and the options, and we got to teach these little breakout sessions. And so we got to title our own breakout sessions. And your title caught my attention on our very first go-around, which was the intended purpose, right?
You want it to sparkle.
It was good clickbait.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so the title of your breakout group for high school seminary students to see if they wanted a dose of Institute was One Surefire Way to Ruin Your Life.
Correct.
Okay. And we thought, let's bring that to the podcast.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you don't want to just tell these high school kids how to ruin their life. We want to tell anybody who wants to listen how to ruin their life.
I want to spread this word. I mean, we get, like you said, you're always accusing me of being up in the clouds. Like, let's get practical here.
Let's get practical. Marshall, what is one surefire way to ruin our lives?
That's a really good question. And there's actually a bunch of different ways you can do it. But for today, I'd like to focus in on one. And let's complain.
Complaining.
I mean, maybe not complain, but complaining.
Let's talk about complaining.
That's much better said.
Because that is the answer to at least one of the answers that we could ruin our life by complaining.
Absolutely. Now, and part of this came to me as I was doing one of my classes that I taught, My Journey Through God's Plan, where we look at the journey of Nephi and his family and of the children of Israel and other different things from the scriptures to try and understand the plan of salvation. And it's a very common phrase and a very common occurrence in these journeys of murmuring keeps coming up.
Yeah.
Children of Israel murmur, Laman and Lemuel murmur, Lehi murmurs. It's constantly there. And I started, brain going, wheels turning of what's wrong with murmuring? Like there's worse things.
Because you're kind of a fan of it.
I love to murmur.
So do I sometimes.
There is the legitimate fun to complaining, right? There really is something just, I sit around, murmur, right? It just feels
good to vent sometimes, right? Just let it out.
And so what's wrong with it? And what's the danger in it? And so I started playing with that, and that's where this came from. And so
take me on a journey. Let's go.
Well, I like to start with our very first, what I like to consider our first murmurer in mortality, at least the one that we see in the scriptures really clearly, and that's Cain. So can we go to Moses 5?
Yeah.
Now, of course, Cain, as we see, he loves Satan more than God, is what it says. And Satan comes to him and says, hey, make an offering to the Lord. And Satan brings of the fruit of the ground and makes an offering to the Lord. And the Lord, as it says in the scriptures, has no respect for Cain and his offering. And then, of course, Abel comes and gives his offering, which is the firstlings of the flock, which is what God has commanded. And so God has respect for Abel and his offering. And where we start our story is Cain is now dealing with the fallout of that his brother's offering's been accepted by God and his offering's been rejected by God, and he's not happy about it. And if you go to verse 21, you see that Satan knew this and it pleased him, and Cain was very wroth and his countenance fell. Then the Lord comes to Cain and gives him some advice. If thou doest well, thou shalt be accepted. And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door, and Satan desireth to have thee. And I've sat on that one, and it's like, and I don't feel like that's a really revolutionary or radical statement by God. He's not asking Cain to do hard things or crazy things. It's just, Cain, if you want to be accepted, do
what I asked you the way I asked you to do it.
Yeah,
you didn't do that.
Yeah, do what you got to do to get this result. There are certain things that will lead to certain outcomes. Do it. And if not, you're going to be in trouble, and Satan will have you. Now, of course, you jump down to verse 26 and you get Cain's response to that. And his response is not good. And Cain was wroth and listened no more to the voice of the Lord, neither to Abel, his brother, who walked in holiness before the Lord. And so his response to the Lord's very simple, straightforward. Let's do this is basically to tell the Lord to shut up. I'm not listening to you anymore. I'm not listening to Abel. This is dumb. This is stupid. And you see it sort of play out in the background here of Cain's very clearly, deeply upset at the unfairness of life. Abel's getting everything that Abel wants. I'm not getting what I want. Abel,
what he perceives as the unfairness of life.
Very, very fair. Yeah, right. That I made a sacrifice, but God didn't like my sacrifice. And you see it play out even a little bit more as you go on. After he kills Abel, he murders Abel, and of course we always end in murder in my class. But you get there, and when God's talking to him, I find it very fascinating, verse 38, when Cain has an opportunity to explain himself to the Lord of why did you kill Abel? His answer is, Satan tempted me because of my brother's flocks, and I was wroth also, for his offering thou didst accept, and not mine. My punishment is greater than I can bear. And I find it fascinating that here in this moment, he's killed Abel, he's talking to God, he has a chance to sort of come clean, say what's going on, and yet in this very moment, that what comes out of his mouth is still complaining. It's not my fault. It's not my fault that I killed Abel. It's Satan's fault, and it's your fault, God. If you had made it fair, if you had loved me as much as you love Abel, if you had treated me the way that you treat Abel, if my life had been like his, this never would have happened. And this moment, and this is where I've been working and running my brain, is this question of, this is really extreme, and this is crazy of how you get to this place where if you live in a world where you complain a lot and you place blame anywhere but on yourself for the horribleness of life or for the what you can do with life, it leads to some really ugly places and ruination of yourself and of relationships. So I know I took us straight through all the way to murder right off the bat. But
from complaining to murder.
Complaining to murder. But I want to throw it to you, this question of, am I crazy? Just kidding. Don't answer that. But but this question of why? What is it about this complaining, this nature of Cain that leads us to this ultimately horrible destination?
As you're walking through that story, I started to think about Elder Whiting from this last general conference and his talk about beware of the second temptation. And he addresses the Adam and Eve story of not just partaking of the fruit, but hiding.
Yes.
Right, the second temptation. And so this almost started to fall in that same camp of, I think Satan does his best work after initial sin or initial poor choices have been made, right? Whether that's hiding or blaming and complaining, there's something about if Satan can get us to shift responsibility somewhere else, because then, again, whether we're hiding or ignoring, right? Cain, I don't think, is hiding from God necessarily, but he's ignoring him.
Yep.
Right? I don't want to listen to you. I don't want to listen to Abel. I don't want to listen to other people. And that's what complaining does. Right? You don't want to listen to anyone who would put the responsibility back on your shoulders. And so you play this pity party. And so I complain, I point fingers, I become more the victim. Yes. The more you try to tell me, the more that fires my feeling of injustice and unfairness.
Right.
And so I don't know, I'm just kind of seeing some correlation here that Satan is really good at messing with our brains after we make the first mistake, and whatever he can do to disconnect me from the Lord. Because again, I think I grew up and I thought that the big problem that disconnected me from the Lord was the initial sin. And again, I like to not be misunderstood. We should always try to avoid sin at all costs.
Sin is bad.
Sin is bad. But it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's part of the plan. And I don't think I don't think it upsets the spirit in my life as much, especially if it sins out of weakness. Like I'm trying to be good, but sometimes I have poor judgment, or I just give into appetites or temptations in the moment, right? And so there is, I think, some sort of loss of the spirit in that moment. But I think the bigger loss comes when I want to justify, place blame, complain about the circumstances that led to my choice, right? And so anyway, so I'm just starting to see that. I think that's why it's so scary, is because Satan steps in and wants to use it as a tool to separate us more from God.
Right, and I love that description of this, and I think you see it play out all in Moses 5 of so much of this, of avoiding God, refusing to listen, and there is even that element of hiding, when God even comes. Where's Abel, your brother? Well, I don't know.
My brother's keeper. Yeah. I'm not responsible for that.
Right, which is very interesting because you see God doing the same thing he did with Adam and Eve in the garden of, hey, Adam, where art thou? Cain, what's going on? He's giving him a chance. Clearly, God knows what's going on. He's giving him a chance to come forward.
To step up and be honest.
And even when God calls Cain on his sin of murder, Cain refuses to ever even still admit that he did anything wrong. he still is pushing that blame out there, which I love. And so one of the other things that I keep noticing in Murmuring, whether it's Laman and Lemuel or Cain or the children of Israel, and we'll get to the other places, but is murmuring destroys your agency, which comes back to your idea of Satan. Putting it there is his whole goal has always been destruction of agency, and murmuring destroys it. It destroys it because, once again, by taking all blame off me and putting it on someone else, I am now someone who's just acted upon. I am not acting in any way, shape, or form. And it's when my life will be happy when God decides to act differently. My life will be better when Abel's out of the picture.
Yeah. Which, again, that's scary, but it's so good to notice that. I think when we realize that Satan wanted to get rid of agency, we don't really know because I think the easy default way is to think he was just going to force us to do what's right.
Yeah.
But there's lots of different ways to get rid of agency.
So many different ways.
Right? We've talked about moral relativism. You just get rid of law would be one way to get rid of agency, or this way to get rid of accountability.
Yeah.
Right? Either way, there are lots of different ways that Satan is trying to turn us into objects that are acted upon as opposed to agents who act.
Right. And with this one, it's such a powerful way to get rid of agency because he doesn't need to do some grand universal plan and get governments in place that are going to implement moral relativism or implement all these things. All he needs is for you to sit there and think, I have no control over my life.
Yes.
And it's all his fault.
Complain, victim.
Right. And so can we go to 1 Nephi chapter 2, which is where we first start to see Laman and Lemuel complaining. And I think there's just a beautiful language there that I think tells us a lot about complaining and how that works and how that once again takes us out of this agency and puts it somewhere else, where talking verse 11 of Laman and Lemuel, now this he spake because of the stiff-neckedness of Laman and Lemuel, for behold, they did murmur in many things against their father. Because, and then he keeps going on, but it's that phrase that against their father. They did murmur against him. So it wasn't just this simple idea that murmuring hurts no one, right? It doesn't hurt anyone for us to sit around and complain.
I can just complain and vent. It's not hurting anyone.
Yeah. Except for you're always complaining
to someone
and
about someone.
Yeah. And
right? Except for those little things there.
And I would change the about to the word that's used in the scriptures, which is against, which
that's
is
more powerful. That's more red flaggish.
Right.
If I just say about, it's a little safer. Against is like, ooh, that's like mean.
Right. If I complain about my bishop, oh, he's just not doing a good job, which is not true. Bishop Bartholomew, if you're listening, you're one of the best people I've ever met. So
it's not what he said about an hour ago. Just kidding.
Liar. But that idea of like, if I can just, I just complain about it because he should do better. But if I realize if I'm doing that, I am against him. I'm actively working against him and against what he's trying to get done in the ward. That's
more severe.
Yeah.
Acting against.
And you see that in the Old Testament as well when you first see the children of Israel in Exodus 17, when they start to complain against Moses after going through the Red Sea on dry ground. It uses the same language. It says the children of Israel did begin to murmur against Moses. And it's that against that is, it complaining puts you on opposite sides of somebody no matter what.
That's a powerful thought. I gotta think about that one a little bit because now I am in opposition to someone, and I'm just thinking of who those terms usually apply to. And that sounds very satanic.
Yeah,
like he is the opposer. He is the one who is working against me, and so for him to convince me to now work against the Abels and Lehis of my life and the Moseses. That's a little scary.
Right. And I love how you say opposer. And when you said that, the word that came up to me is the word that John uses to describe Satan, the accuser of our brethren. And as I think of all my complaints that I've made, they all come down to accusing somebody else of not doing what they should be doing. Or not doing what I think they should be doing.
You're making complaining sound very serious to me now. Well, like these are heavy terms, against and opposer and accuser and Satan. And I just like to complain sometimes.
Right? Well, and like I make it sound heavy, but you look at scripture, we started with Cain and we went to murdering Abel to get rid of his problems. And we look at Laman and Lemuel, our other big complainers in the Book of Mormon, and they end up as the solution to their problems is constantly kill Nephi.
We want to kill him.
We want to
kill
him
out of the picture.
And the children of Israel get to the same place with Moses and the other people that try and lead them. How many prophets did they kill? They picked up stones to stone Joshua and Caleb and Moses when they tried to get them into the promised land so they could go back to Egypt and be slaves, because at least then we had better food than manna. And I mean, it's wild that scripturally it keeps leading to this drastic end of blaming somebody else, complaining about my life, and putting all accountability elsewhere leads me to, well, massive choices that ends up literally destroying the lives of others and our own lives.
It's interesting, like the measures we will go to protect our ego, to protect our whatever. Because I'm just sitting there thinking, when I complain, like if I'm to be honest, it seems to always be rooted in some type of selfishness.
Oh.
Right? Things didn't go the way I wanted them to, or I was dealt this injustice. And so to protect that, to protect my ego, it comes out in the form of complaint.
Right. And it's ego and protect my ego or show my pride of, if I were doing this, this would be done differently.
Yes.
It would be done better.
Yeah. So it like springs out of selfishness and comes out as pride.
Which then comes to this back idea of Cain is definitely not the first story of complaining in the scriptures. It would be Satan in the premortal existence of, why aren't you choosing me? This plan is stupid and it's unfair. and so, we always talk about pride being the original sin of Satan, and pride is almost always demonstrated by some level of complaining against those who are just not as good as you, or who are to blame for the things that are keeping you down.
Okay. Let me throw something into the conversation with those. Well, and you said something, so I'll just quote you. I'll paraphrase quote you. So I came in to listen to one of your sessions with these high school students.
So bad.
And when you tied it with, like, in all these stories, whether it be Cain and Abel, Laman and Lemuel and Nephi, children of Israel and Moses, it all led to desires for murder.
Yeah.
And you made some statement like this: your complaining might not lead you to physically murder someone, but it will murder your relationships. It will murder the spirit in your life. It will murder joy. That hit hard to me as I started thinking about, like, what am I murdering, quote unquote, through complaining?
Right.
And again, it might start off, who cares where it starts, right? Satan doesn't care where it starts. It's the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step kind of thing. As long as he can get me distance from deep relationships, from humility, from my God, from that vulnerability and honesty that God was inviting Cain into, right? And he's getting me to walk away from that. Every complaint I am making is at least one step in the wrong direction away from reconciliation or honesty or healing.
Right. And even if the complaint is, I hate to say the word, but is valid, right? Because there are things that go wrong in our lives that are not our fault, that are to someone else is
wrong.
To blame for those things.
Yes, there are wrong things.
There are wrong things. People use their agency to hurt you. They use their agency to hurt people you love. Life is just unfair.
Yeah.
It really is. And yet complaining will never lead you in the right way.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, I was just with this idea of leading back to God. I go back to Cain and the story of Cain at the beginning of when he offers that sacrifice. And Book of Moses makes it clear that he offers that sacrifice because Satan asked him to, which is problematic, and it's the wrong sacrifice and the wrong reason and all the wrongs. And when God comes to Cain, there is no condemnation in that first interaction, just instruction and an invitation to face a different direction, to switch gears. And he responds with further complaining and more problems. And I just feel like that's once again, that real key is life might be unfair. You might have messed up, but once again, like you said, that's that second sin.
Yeah, what do we choose to do after the first one?
Yeah.
Whether it was my poor choice or some poor choice that was made against me, either way, what do I do after that seems to determine so much of our lives and our happiness? So much. You were going somewhere. I was going to share this. Do you remember Elder Holland's talk? This is way back. We're old, so you'll remember. April 2007, The Tongue of Angels. Yes, I do. Remember? It was good. I mean, so many things that I've remembered for years about this talk. But let me just read these two paragraphs because I've thought about, and I know these, but when I remember them, I do better with trying not to complain. There's Elder Holland, quote, "We should honor the Savior's declaration to be of good cheer. Indeed, it seems to me we may be more guilty of breaking that commandment than almost any other." That was the first time I'd ever heard that as a commandment. The be of good cheer is a commandment. Speak hopefully, speak encouragingly, including about yourself. Try not to complain and moan incessantly. As someone once said, even in the golden age of civilization, someone undoubtedly grumbled that everything looked too yellow. Which is good. And then this is my favorite part. This is so Elder Holland. "I have often thought that Nephi's being bound with cords and beaten by rods must have been more tolerable to him than listening to Laman and Lemuel's constant murmuring. Surely he must have said at least once, 'Hit me one more time, I can still hear you.'" That is so good. Yes, life has its problems, and yes, there are negative things to face. But please accept one of Elder Holland's maxims for living. No misfortune is so bad that whining about it won't make it worse.
Yep.
And I remember that for years, especially the one-liners like, "Hit me one more time, I can still hear you." Because there is something so heavy when other people complain. Like it really is like the cartoon version of that like rain cloud that follows you down. When I hear other people complain, it just sucks light out of me. It sucks life out of me. And I sit there and think, and I do that to other people. The minute I complain, whether it would be interesting if you could actually see the light and life that you suck out of people when we start to complain, because it just creates this spirit of heaviness. Again, life is hard and choices are made, and sometimes those choices are bad. But complaining about it never makes it better.
Yeah.
It only makes it worse.
Only.
So why do I still complain in those moments?
Because it feels so good for just 1 second.
Like so many sins.
Right?
Jump in, Keely.
I just like this idea that like complaining is a choice that's after the choice.
Yes.
And it's like you're choosing God or you're choosing Satan. And like I don't like, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the institute teachers here, but I don't believe there's any gray. It's either it's God or it's Satan, one or the other. It can't be anywhere in between. And so when I think of it in that way, like now after this, if I ever start complaining, I'm gonna be like, oh wait, I got to choose God. And it just makes me think of, I think there was a talk by President Eyring, and he was talking about how Satan is going to attack you right before you pray and right after you pray. And I feel like that's another one of those things of when you're done praying, you can either choose to just like get up and leave, or you can sit and you can wait. And like for me, that's like choosing God, choosing to wait and to listen to him. Yeah. And I feel like that's the same thing. Once something happens, I'm going to sit and I'm going to wait and I'm going to listen and I'm going to make that choice of, am I going to complain or am I just going to try and be more Christ-like and move on?
Yeah. Because my default, and again, anytime it's my default, that should be a red flag for me because the natural man is my default. Yep. So my default is bad thing happen, complain, right? Versus a conscious agency empowered, I can choose right now, even though this was bad or I didn't agree with it or it didn't go the way I wanted, I can choose God in this moment. And choosing him might just look like not complaining.
Yeah. Which I love how you put that, because it really is a very different thing. Am I going to choose to give up my agency? Am I going to choose Satan? Or am I going to choose God? Which I love how you put it here. Choosing God means choosing to be an empowered person in charge of my own life. This idea, you look through history and you see people who have had the deck completely stacked against them in so many ways. But then you see certain people with the deck stacked against them, everything wrong, everything unfair, and they choose to take control of any portion of their life that they can. They do whatever they can in that small little area of freedom that they have, and they build it and they change and they become better than they were as a result. It doesn't get rid of all of the outside forces that are pulling them back or any of the like inborn characteristics and deficiencies that we may have. It doesn't get rid of them, but it does make it so that now you are empowered to do everything about that you want to do. Yeah. Which for me is such a powerful thing to look at history and leaving the scriptures, which are also history, but leave that and just see those people time and time again who show that people who stop blaming others and take accountability and then decide to fix what they can and do what they can with what they have, their lives are just so significantly different than anyone else's lives.
Okay, that might get at the heart of a question that I wanted to dive in with you that is going to kind of flip this conversation on its head a little bit.
Woo!
So I was thinking, like, I was ready, like, I've been thinking about complaining and, like, why I complain and how to do better with it. And this idea of agency and choosing God, all that was on my radar. And then I stumbled across this LDS Living article about righteous complaining. And I was just kind of like, okay, I got to read this. Let me share with you two things that got me thinking, and maybe it's semantics.
Yeah, it often is. Right?
It often is. But okay, two interesting stories. One from church history, and then one from the author of this article's own life. So here's the church history story. The background to the Word of Wisdom, at least part of the background. We got into that a couple episodes ago. Yeah. But this is a quote from Brigham Young. Brigham recalled, quote, "The complaints of Joseph's wife of having to clean so filthy a floor made the prophet think upon the matter, and he inquired of the Lord relating to the conduct of the elders in using tobacco, and the revelation known as the Word of Wisdom was the result of this inquiry." End quote. That's just an interesting way that Brigham chose to say it. The complaints of Emma led to this, causing her husband to think more about a topic. Second example, and there's more in the article, it was interesting, but she had talked about growing up in this church culture where living the gospel means to be happy. And it works for her really good. Through seminary, through high school, I can choose to be happy. The gospel makes me happy. And then she got on a mission, and she got a really hard companion. And then she wasn't happy. And then she felt guilty for not being happy and thought she was doing something wrong. And so later on in the article, she writes this: "As for my mission, once I accepted that being unhappy wasn't a weakness, I was able to take my complaints to my district leader, who then used the trainings in our district meetings to address certain issues that plagued my companionship. And only once I shared my struggles and complaints with the mission president was he able to offer insights into my companion's background that gave me the patience and charity I needed, and gradually things in my companionship improved." Those are interesting stories. So give me your thoughts, because I know you have great thoughts. Is there a time when complaint can be righteous, good, productive?
Well, I think just even using those two stories that you shared, something that I noticed is that neither of those follow the second sin that we've been talking about. It isn't this muttering, murmuring in silence and murmuring against my companion or murmuring against Joseph and this stupid school. The prophets are so gross and I hate it. There's a difference between saying, I see a problem here. I don't even view that as complaining per se, right? That's the word that's used in the Book of Mormon in the Old Testament, murmuring. Uh-huh. I feel like there's a very big difference between murmuring against your father, or murmuring against your companion, murmuring against the school of the prophets, and saying, "Hey, I noticed something that we could do better."
What would you call that second one?
I would call that using your agency, because I would call it acting, because you're acting because you're saying, what can I, and partly is that idea of like, I'm noticing a problem, what can we do to fix it? I had an experience on my mission, very similar, was not happy with a companion, and it was a real hard time, and I went to my mission president and I complained, and interestingly enough, he said, "I need you to write down every single day 5 things that this elder can do that you cannot." And it was a really good lesson for me. It was really good. And partly it was A, stopped me from complaining, and B, returned my focus somewhere else and made it, once again, something that I could act on. I could not change this person's behavior, this person's life, this person's personality. I couldn't. I have no power to do that. But I could change mine. And I see that in those stories there. So I don't know what I would call it. I would call it, well, it sounds, rather than complaining to district leader, it sounds like I would say counseling with a district leader. Am I counseled with Joseph Smith about this?
I like it because I hadn't thought of that word. I thought of other things of trying to address a problem, trying to find solutions. To me, this use of the word in these two examples is solution-based, not victim-based.
Yes.
Right. And so I like counseling with, because what I've noticed here was my worry, and this was why it was so good that I think that this came on my radar. This conversation that we had for the first half could be misunderstood too far to say you and I should just put on a smile no matter what.
Yeah.
Right. Even if things are bad, even if things are hurtful, even if there's things that are that you're struggling with, just put on a smile and keep it to yourself because you can't complain because
Yeah,
that's
no
choosing
complaining.
Satan.
Yeah.
Right? And to say, no, but if it just comes out as complaint in and of itself, meaning just whining, moaning, pointing at someone and I'm now complaining against them, I think we could label all of those things as unhealthy, unproductive, unchristlike.
Yes.
But if I can, in that hurt, in that frustration, in that moment, say, this is bad, I don't want to complain about it, but I do want to find solutions to it. And the only way to find solutions is it needs to be addressed.
Yes.
I don't have to hold on to this. I can be vulnerable enough to, and maybe it even starts as what might feel like complaint because I don't know how to say it, right? I hope we're all freed up enough to that this can be messy, but somewhere in the venting of whatever the problem is to say, but I don't want to just put this out there to feel like I'm a victim. Yeah. I want to find solutions. So what can I do, again, as an agent to act? What can I do? What can we do? I need help.
Yes.
I think that's what it is. And so I'm fine with the word complaint in both of these stories, but I think that it can't just be about complaining about a problem. Yes. It's about trying to find solutions, and I need help.
Right, because there is a significant difference between, hey, I'm just calling because I need to tell you that this person in my life is an idiot, versus, hey, I really need to figure out how to fix this, or how I can have a better life because of this. I'm even thinking from like a ward council standpoint. You're sitting there and you're like, there's two, gospel doctrine. Sunday school is the worst and everyone hates it and it's just bad. It's just, and you can see that happening, right?
Yeah, it could just spread and we could all complain about it. Going, I know, it's bad.
It's bad. Or we could say, hey, I've noticed gospel doctrine isn't up to where it should be. Sunday school's not where it should be. What can we do to make it better? Because for me, that word complaining is, and sometimes it does come out, like you said, it's messy, but it's always better. I'm even thinking now like relationship with your spouse, right? It's always better to say like, hey, I'm noticing we're struggling right here. What can we do about this versus you are driving me nuts. You always do this. And immediately everything breaks down because now it's me versus her. I'm complaining against her versus I'm coming to you with a legitimate concern that I want to fix, not that I'm trying to, because the other one often comes out as I'm coming to you to say I'm unhappy and I just need you to know that it's your fault. Yeah. And that never goes well.
No, just puts everyone on the defensive.
I feel like this is interesting, like after that example, just thinking about this, because I think about like my relationship with my spouse, and like this might be with every relationship, is it always seems that like the girl complains and the guy tries to offer solutions and she doesn't want that. Like she just wants to complain.
I've seen that before.
I've never experienced it.
Like it's a very normal thing in relationships. But I think the difference is that like sometimes I just need to get it out, but I think that I need to talk to God about it instead. Because like once it's with another person that you're talking about another person, then, it can turn into like a slander on that person. Yeah. And you just start like, oh yeah, they're the worst. Da, 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 da. But when I talk to God, it's like a reminder that I'm talking to God. And like, I know what you'd probably say right now. You would probably tell me that I should be a little bit nicer. No. But I do think that there is like a lot, like as a woman, I need to get it out somewhere. And so maybe in a way, like we have these feelings because God wants us to turn to him. And maybe that's the way that we need to be thinking about it. Yeah. And I think the other thing too is that I can feel the difference between complaining and not wanting a solution, between like complaining and being open-minded to like, I know that things are going to get better and I know things are going to change. But when you're complaining and you have the attitude of like, I don't want to fix this, I don't want to see the solutions, then that's when it's like, it's hard and it's not a good thing.
That's good, because I think even another word that I would say, so sometimes it could be counseling, but sometimes I don't necessarily want to counsel, I just want to share. Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting difference between those two words versus I think when it's complaining, it again turns into it's usually against someone, maybe even against God and my life circumstances, against a person who reacted however. But if I'm just sharing, I think that comes across in a very different way where it could still be very healthy and helpful, saying, I need to process this. I need to tell you why I'm struggling and what happened, but I'm just doing this the way it's not about a person. Mm-hmm. This is just what it's doing to me inside, and I can't bottle that up. So I want to share with you. I think that would feel very different.
And I feel that a lot with more conversations between different like with me and another woman is that usually like we'll get it out and then at the end we have to be like, I'm sorry, I do like love this person. I do think they're amazing. I'm not trying to hate on them. I just have to get this out. And like I hope that you know that I'm not trying to sway your opinion of them. And I don't want you to think that like I'm an awful person for saying all these things. I just had to get it out.
Yeah.
So like, what are your thoughts on that? Is that healthy? Is that okay? Is that, because like, what
Let's
if
turn
you
that to therapist, Marshall.
Yeah. I'm like sometimes you can go through really hard things and you just need somebody that can listen and can be compassionate with you.
Yeah.
And I think listening, compassion is a huge part of it's a huge part of the gospel, right? Mourn with those that mourn, comfort those that stand in need of comfort.
Yes.
But I do think there's a danger zone though there of am I really doing this just to process through it, or am I really trying to make sure that even subconsciously that they will admit that I'm in the right and they're in the
I'm
wrong.
the good guy and they're the bad guy.
Yeah, I'm steady. And so I for me, it always comes down to solution of am I doing this, and the process is important. Am I going through the process so that I can be ready to now take action on my own? And for me, that's the real key of action on my own. If my solution is for that person to change, then I've reached the wrong point of my I've turned it into complaining, because very well they might need to change, but that's neither here nor there with me. I have no control over that, and it will make my life miserable if my entire happiness is going to be based on whether or not they're going to change.
Yeah.
And so if I'm processing, and I do believe in process, right? Sometimes you need to like figure out what you're actually feeling, what's going on, and sometimes people need to be willing to listen, and then. Does this process have a point?
Yes.
Does this process have a solution? Does it have a place we're going to, rather than just like, all right, okay, good. Because if not, then for me, then the complaints become cyclical, because the next time the person does that, which they inevitably will, you're just going to go back and complain about it again, rather than have something in place that's going to make your life better. I don't know if that even made sense.
No, I think that's really good. Just as you're saying that, I started thinking about how you can tell if the tree is good by its fruits.
Yeah.
And so do the fruits of me sharing whatever I needed to share in my frustration or in my vulnerability, does it eventually start to lead to fruits of faith, hope, and charity? Yeah. Or does it feel more like the fruits of more discouraged, more frustrated, more angry? Yeah. And if it starts to feel like it's leading me to faith, hope, and charity, then I think I'm obviously doing it in a way that is productive and it really is getting to some sort of solution. Yeah. If it's just really fuel on this fire of what I'm already feeling that's negative, then chances are it's probably crossed a line and Satan is leading me carefully the wrong direction.
Yeah, if I finish a vent session with someone and I'm more angry at the situation, more upset at an individual than I was when I started, I'm definitely doing the wrong way.
Yeah, and we're not getting closer to a solution.
Definitely, because now I've just, oh no, it is their fault. It is their fault. Oh yeah, no.
Yes, you're more convinced and you're more in the victim mentality and more against them than even when we started. So obviously I took 2 steps the wrong direction.
And I think if anything that I've learned from the scriptures is that people who follow God are never victim mentality. They do become victims of other people. People hurt them. People do bad things. You're not exempt from mortality just because you follow God. But those who follow God are never subject to victim mentality. Yeah. They are always choosing. They're always exercising agency. They're always acting rather than being acted upon. Even when someone acts on them, they still recognize that they have a choice to move forward. It's the Alma and Amulek after Ammonihah, right? They keep going, and it always amazes me. They witness the horrors of Ammonihah, and the very next thing they do after they finally escape Ammonihah is find Zeezrom and heal him. Talk about, if anyone had a right to sit down and lay into somebody and complain and tell him everything that was wrong with him and everything that they experienced as a result of them, they did. But they didn't. They chose to act, and that allowed him to then act. And what a powerful thing of this moment of this person caused them unspeakable pain, and caused unspeakable pain, well, to everybody in the community because of his words, because of his actions, because of what he ended up causing. And they moved forward, which comes back. Now we come full circle to forgiveness, right? That's why we're commanded to forgive, because when we forgive, we're actually using our agency. We're acting when we refuse to forgive, when we refuse to make these efforts, we're letting them act on us and we're becoming subject to them. And God's trying to help us rise above that.
Everything he's trying to help us rise above it. I like that because for me, it's just getting more clear in my mind. I think it might have been even one of the other teachers in one of the seminaries we were at, and we were having this conversation, I think, about complaining. And he mentioned, well, complaining just feels good sometimes. And at first, I was going to just agree, like, yeah, sometimes it does just feel good to complain. But honestly, I think I would take that back. Like when it's just complaining for the sake of complaining, I don't know if that ever really does feel good. Again, there's kind of this release moment, but it never feels good in the most spiritual sense. Like it never feels good to my soul. It always makes me, like in retrospect, look back and say, I should have shut my mouth there. Now, if it was sharing or counseling, again, those are the two words I kind of like that we landed on. If it just comes across as sharing kind of where I'm at, and maybe I don't need a solution just yet, but I just need a process, or I'm counseling with, I want to find a solution. This isn't about a person. This is just trying to make things better because there was something that was wrong. That does make me feel better.
Yeah.
That makes me feel empowered. I do it. I'm more careful with my words when I'm sharing and counseling. Complaining, I just throw it out there without thought.
Let it all go.
They're not a child of God anymore. They're an object. Not only am I an object that's being acted upon, but now I turn them into other people. Yep. I start to categorize everyone and everything, right? And so I don't think complaining has ever done one good thing for me in my life.
And as you're talking, I couldn't help but think of the satisfaction that I get when I complain. To reveal my wicked self completely here, but yes, but the satisfaction that I get when I complain really comes down to if I'm complaining and not trying to fix it, not trying to share or counsel, it is the satisfaction of making someone else just as miserable as me, getting them on my side. Oh, you're right. That guy's,
You're right. Oh,
I'm Team Marshall. Right?
That's what
Team
feels
Marshall
good.
all
It's
the way.
the complaining, but when someone validates your complaining, like that all of a sudden is the dopamine.
Yeah, exactly. It's an old Calvin and Hobbes where Calvin makes Susie crabby at the bus stop because he's mad about going to school, and his response is like, "Oh, nothing helps a bad mood like spreading it around," right? And it's really true. There's something very satisfying about like, oh, yeah, you're right. I convinced you too. Yeah, life's the worst. Yeah, join the club.
And I don't want to fall into that. I mean, that's Satan, right? Misery loves company. Yep. Satan loves company. And I'm like, that's what I get out of it. Complaining invites more complaining and more rationalizing and more pointing fingers.
Exactly. And I think there is some power once again of and I love how Keeley brings up this idea of the old stereotypes of I just need you to listen. I just need you to fix it. I have a solution to your problem.
It's not about the nail.
It's not about, that's the best video ever.
You can go back and rewatch that video
we'll put
after
that in
this.
the notes. But that moment of they can be both can be godly, because counseling together involves, I need to understand what you're feeling and why you're feeling it. And I need to be so much better at that. With myself and with others, and listening. And Sue, I need to be much better at that.
He looked at me as he said that, Sue, but he was directed towards you.
But there's that moment of there's realness there of everyone needs to be better at something, and whether we're better at listening and helping people process, or whether we're better at making sure that this is something I'm looking for resolution. I'm looking for solutions. I'm looking for counsel rather than just, I need you to be on my side.
There's a whole nother conversation, maybe, or at least I'll just throw this out there. There's a whole nother piece that we could probably develop a skill set when others are complaining to not feed into that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just thinking of that for a second. Like if I, not only to like recognize it in myself when I'm the complainer, but if the dopamine hit is when the complaint leads to validation, I should probably be very careful not to feed into that when others are complaining. And could I help steer them towards either sharing or counseling?
Yeah. And
if they're not ready for either of those two, to then stop the complaint.
Yeah, I'm even thinking like word counsel when someone's like, yeah, Sunday school is the worst. Brother Smith really needs to get his act together. And the bishop, or Relief Society president, are very kindly responding with okay, what do you think we could do to make Sunday school better? Right? And that's not something that needs a lot of like, I need to work through my problems that I hate gospel doctrine, but there's something that, okay, let's just change the question so
Change
we're
the
looking at
conversation.
the right thing.
Solution based versus complaint based.
Like not feeding into it, but then also like still showing them that you love them and you care about them and you want to listen. I feel like that's a very hard,
Yeah.
Right.
because sometimes like the way that it has been shown in the past is feeding into it. So you're like, okay, what needs to change to show them that I still care and I still love them without them thinking that like I don't care because I'm not feeding into it.
Yeah, and
I was just gonna think. I gotta pay attention to that. That's a skill set I need to figure out. Like, what is that middle ground to be there, listening, mourning with those that mourn, and yet not feeding the fire of complaint for those who complain.
And I think part of that, I think we have to learn that middle ground, and it's there. But even going back to our first story, there's going to be people who will stop talking to you because you won't give them what they want. And I think we're going to have to be okay with that as well. Yeah. That sometimes if that person who does not want solutions, who does not want to grow, stops coming to complain to you, then
you're in good company.
Then you're as it was with God and
Cain
with
did
Abel.
that with God. Yeah.
That sometimes that's where it ends, is that you can't allow yourself to be subject to all the negativity and all the complaining and all the murmuring and all of the anger and vitriol just for the sake of trying to help someone else feel better. Of that, it's okay to say, no.
I'm not your person. If you're just going to want to complain and like vilify them, I'm not going to go there.
I'm happy to hear how you feel, but I'm also going to try and help you take ownership. And if they don't want that,
that's
then
good.
Sorry.
That's good. I want to share one last thing and then jump in with any other final thoughts as you think about this. Orson F. Whitney, the spirit of the gospel is optimistic. It trusts in God and looks on the bright side of things. The opposite or pessimistic spirit drags men down and away from God, looks on the dark side, murmurs, complains, and is slow to yield obedience. Again, not to feel like we have to put on this happy face with everything that happens to us. That is super dangerous, right? I think we've done that in some ways to people unintentionally. But to realize, but the spirit of the gospel is optimistic. It's empowering. It's agency based. It's not complaining. It's not murmuring. If it's complaining and murmuring for the sake of complaining and murmuring, there's a different spirit at work there. And I want to just be super clear about that. Again, I don't want to like just brush that under the rug as often as I do. Just like, oh, it's just normal. I don't want to be normal. I want to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. I want to live in a higher and holier way. So that's why I love that you were already talking about this in the seminaries. I wanted to have this chat with you because I want to take it as serious as it is. I don't want to murder relationships or the spirit or my own salvation ultimately because I feed into this pessimistic spirit.
I love it. And I think that's a real key. And for me, going to what you said, is the gospel is optimistic, not because we're fake or have a false view. It's optimistic because it believes that every single one of us, and it teaches, and it's true, that every single one of us has the power to take ownership of our own lives and our own choices.
Through agency and the atonement of Jesus Christ.
Yep. Through his power and through his gifts to us, I can make my life better, no matter what my life is.
No matter what's done to me.
Yeah. No matter what hand I'm dealt, I can make it better.
Okay, I don't want to ruin my life. One surefire way to ruin my life is complaining. So if you catch me complaining, be very kind. Find that middle ground with me. Help redirect me to either sharing or counseling, and I will stop complaining as much.
Yeah, I'm going to have to repent. So it's one of those things that's so small, but it's not. It's so small, but it's not.
Yeah. No, thanks for the chat.
This
is good. Thanks for joining us, and we will chat with you next time.
Bye.